Welcome to the Movie Spoiler Club, the channel where you can watch movie, television, and streaming series within minutes. Today we're going to spoil the movie Spider-Man 2002. This movie story plot is about Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire, student, who after being bitten by a genetically altered spider, gains superhuman strength and the spider-like ability to cling to any surface. He vows to use his abilities to fight crime, coming to understand the words of his beloved Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. Who am I? Are you sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. Peter Parker is not the average ordinary guy in your senior high school English class. The story begins with a spectacled Peter Parker sprinting after a school bus barreling down the street on a muggy morning in Queens, New York. Everyone seems mostly unaware of the young man shouting desperately to stop the bus. Everyone except for bright blue-eyed Mary Jane. Mary Jane has fiery red hair that flows past her shoulders, a striking white smile, and dimples in her cheeks. As narrated, Peter notes that he admires her from afar, wondering if he'll ever have a chance with the girl next door. Finally, Mary Jane storms toward the front of the bus in irritation and sympathetically asserts that the driver pull over to let the poor guy on. Parker enters the bus exhausted and meanders down the aisle in search of a seat. While every person glare and mock him, the bus arrives at Columbus University for a class field trip. This is where we meet Harry Osborn, Peter Parker's close friend. We are also introduced to Norman Osborn, Harry's father. Harry approaches Peter Parker and is quickly interrupted by Norman. Harry introduces his father to Peter Parker. Peter mentions his admiration for Norman Osborn's professional work. Norman is flattered and impressed that a young man like Parker has such a strong interest in his field of work. The class teacher interjects, signaling that it is time to move along with the day's agenda. The class participates in a tour of Oscorp's laboratory facility. Parker, a photographer for the school newspaper, has a camera strung around his neck. Peter seems once again distracted by the simple beauty of Mary Jane, who stands just a few feet away. Harry insists that Peter makes conversation, but conversation isn't Peter's strength. There aren't many strengths that Peter has, and talking to beautiful girls is definitely out of the question. Harry innocently slides in next to Mary Jane to show Peter how simple it could be. Harry uses the exact factoids that Peter references earlier to Harry, and surprisingly Mary Jane is interested and curious. If Peter had Harry's charm, he might just have a chance. The tour focuses on the spider exhibit and explains the research they are working on with the species. The genetically modified spiders are crawling inside their cases when Mary Jane notices that the tour guide has miscounted the spiders. The tour guide brushes off the comment, making a quick excuse that the missing spider might be partaking in a particular study. The camera pans up to reveal the unique arachnid spinning a delicate web. Peter finds a reason to interact with Mary Jane and invites her to pose for the paper. The girl giggles sweetly and agrees to be his model. Parker snaps a few different shots of Mary Jane in the lab, looking studious and excited. The escaped spider makes his descent towards Parker. The spider lands on Parker's hand as he is snapping the last shot of MJ, and sinks its fangs into his tender skin. Peter lets out a startled shriek and flicks the spider off of him. He notices the mark on his hand and then searches the ground for the offending spider. The spider runs away on the floor. Peter shrugs it off and catches up with the rest of his class. Meanwhile, in another area of the facility, Norman Osborn is developing a super soldier serum. The project is taking longer than expected and the team is in danger of losing their funding for the study. Norman is aggravated by this threat and the pressure seems to fall on him. Later that day, Peter returns home. Peter lost his parents years ago when he was a much younger boy, and since then has been living with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Tonight, he isn't much for chit-chat. He brushes past his aunt and uncle to the privacy of his bedroom. There he confronts the chills and mysterious abdominal pain. Quite sure he is severely ill, he passes out for the night from the agony. The next morning, Peter Parker wakes refreshed and energized. He reaches for his glasses groggily and can't see clearly. Confused, he removes the glasses and can see perfectly. Parker turns toward his bedroom mirror in disbelief and notices that his below-average physique has transformed overnight. Peter is shocked to see a toned and chiseled body in the reflection of the mirror. As he makes his way to school, he notices more differences about himself. He can now sense danger before any of his peers, giving him sharp reflexes. The new Peter has a new sense of self-confidence and is taking this opportunity to catch the attention of Mary Jane. What do other guys have that Peter doesn't? A sweet car, Peter devises a plan to earn a little extra cash by entering a wrestling match. He spends the night drawing up sketches of his costume and character for the match. 3 minutes in the ring gets him $3,000. The night of the match, Peter arrives feeling a little less confident than the night before. The lights fan towards the curtain to introduce Peter Parker as the human spider. Peter manages to pin his opponent in 2 minutes, but the manager rips him off and only pays him $100. Peter storms out angry just as another man enters to rob the manager. The altercation goes unnoticed by Peter and even haphazardly helps the thief get away. Disappointed, Peter walks home but is distracted by a crowd of people on the street. Peter pushes through the crowd to find his Uncle Ben in a pool of blood. Peter arrives just in time to say goodbye as Uncle Ben takes his last breath. Distraught, Peter takes off into the night after the carjacker that murdered his uncle. Parker shows off his web-slinging skills by swinging through the streets. The chase leads to an abandoned building where the carjacker thinks he has escaped the police. Instead, the human spider has spun a web and is ready to surprise the carjacker. The two fight each other. Peter unmasks the man and sees that the man who stole his uncle's car and shot him in cold-blood murder is the same man from the wrestling match who robbed the manager. Momentarily stunned, Peter ultimately disarms the man, confronts him about his crimes, and decides to spare his life even though he was so careless with his uncles. The man trips and falls out the window of the abandoned building and dies. Life continues on for Peter, and in the springtime he graduates. Peter Parker by day, and by night he is the crime-fighting Spider-Man making splashes on the news. Parker finds a freelance opportunity as a photographer with the Daily Bugle. Mr. Jameson is very impressed with the high-quality images Peter manages to snap of Spider-Man. All things considered, Peter is doing well, except his best friend Harry is dating the girl of his dreams, Mary Jane. The World Unity Festival is a huge public event and everyone is attending. Peter is part of the press. Harry and Mary Jane are also in attendance. Harry means to introduce MJ to his father, Norman. Norman has just been notified that the board is selling their company and Norman is out of the job. Infuriated, Norman disappears to fume privately. The festival seems to go on without a hitch until Peter senses danger. Within moments, an unidentified armored character glides in on a hoverboard, unbeknownst to everyone involved. This unidentified flying person is Norman Osborn taking out his aggression on his colleagues. The strange masked individual bombs the board of Oscorp, catching MJ and Harry in the crosshairs. Peter jumps into action, ripping off his gray zip jacket to reveal a new and improved Spider-Man costume. In his attempt to de-escalate the attack, he hears Mary Jane's plea for help. Spider-Man rushes to save her before she is crushed by debris or flames. The mysterious gliding villain escapes, and Mary Jane develops a crush. As the plot continues to thicken, the villain becomes known as the Green Goblin. This armored man tries to convince Spider-Man to team up and work together. When Spider-Man refuses the offer, the two duke it out, where Spider-Man suffers a massive cut on his arm. Back in the normal life, Peter and Harry are hosting Thanksgiving, and everyone's invited. During dinner and between awkward conversations, Norman Osborn notices that Peter has a strange cut on his arm. This alarms Norman because now he knows that Peter Parker, a boy, is Spider-Man. He realizes that now he must be extremely careful that Peter Parker doesn't find out his own secret identity. Aunt May winds up in the hospital because the Green Goblin makes an attempt on her life. Peter is distraught, and Mary Jane provides sympathy and friendship to poor Peter. Harry Osborn arrives at the hospital with flowers but catches Mary Jane and Peter holding hands. Outraged, Harry storms off and confides in his father. Norman sympathizes with his son's unfortunate situation and finds Spider-Man's weakness. Norman and the Green Goblin seem to be dueling personalities, both aware of each other's existence but no recollection of each other's actions. While Peter and Mary Jane are sharing a moment at the hospital, Peter learns that Mary Jane is in love with someone else, and the Green Goblin is plotting Spider-Man's tragic demise. The Green Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane from her apartment to use her to get to Peter Parker. If the Goblin can destroy Peter's heart, he can defeat Spider-Man. The Green Goblin lures Peter Parker to him with Mary Jane as bait. Spider-Man rushes to the rescue but Green Goblin escalates things further. He forces Spider-Man to choose. He must choose to save a girl he cares about or a tram full of innocent children. The Green Goblin drops both MJ and the tram at the same time, forcing Spider-Man to make a decision instantly. Spider-Man reaches for MJ and uses his unique abilities to also save the tram cart full of kids. Once everyone has returned to the ground safely, Spider-Man refocuses on his opponent. The fight continues until the Green Goblin can't match Spider-Man's quick reflexes and is impaled by his own technology. Norman begs Peter to keep his secret from Harry. Peter agrees and takes Norman's body back to his home. but Harry is there and spots Spider-Man with his deceased father. At the funeral, Harry swears revenge on Spider-Man for murdering his father. Peter pays respects to his beloved Uncle Ben. Mary Jane confesses her love for Peter, but Peter admits that although he cares deeply for her, he can't be anything more than her friend. Through this experience, Peter has learned that those he loves will always be targeted in order to defeat Spider-Man. He has to keep his loved ones at a distance because the risk is far too great. Movie trivia. Do you know that Hugh Jackman revealed that he was supposed to have a brief cameo as Wolverine? Jackman actually showed up in New York to film the scene, but the entire plan was scrapped when the crew couldn't get access to the Wolverine costume from X-Men 2000. This movie gets the movie rating of 7.3 from IMDb, Tomatometer rating of 90 and audience score of 67 from Rotten Tomatoes. Thank you for watching and be sure to hit like, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comment section, and hit the notification bell for the new movie spoiler video every week.